Hi, I'm Eve, and I'm really excited to share with you some of the things we are hearing, seeing, and thinking as we look to shape GM Moving for the next decade. So, GM Moving is our shared Greater Manchester movement for movement. It's the things you do, it's the things I do, it's the things we all do to keep ourselves moving, to keep each other moving, and design moving into our everyday lives for happier, healthier, more active Greater Manchester. This is because we recognise in Greater Manchester the scale of the challenge that we have in tackling inactivity, inequality, our crisis in health, the economy, and the environment, and collectively recovering from the pandemic. And we know that the way to meet these challenges is by working together as a whole system to create the conditions for change, systems change, culture change, behaviour change. GM moving means different things to different people. This is some of the things we're hearing so far. For some, it's a place to share advice and learning. For others, it's a web of connectivity. For some, it's the glue that binds us together. Some see it as an umbrella, and others, it's a golden thread that runs through everything we do and our North Star. We need everyone to play their full part, to include our most influential leaders and partners. So, core to this movement is a formal commitment and plan shaped and agreed by you alongside our Greater Manchester Mayor and key partners across the city region. This maps an overview of the commitment and journey so far, from blueprint to plan to now collectively shaping GM Moving in Action, our strategy for the next decade. And so what? How do we know it's working? Well, we've observed change in different ways. Some things we've been able to count, like the increased number of people living active lives and the closing and inequality gaps around physical activity. Some things we can't easily count, but they're just as important in measuring system change, like the growth of shared commitment and understanding across the system. As a learning system, we're training our attention to recognise and make sense of the things we see, hear, and feel, and to encourage good, open feedback. To make the less visible and tangible changes more observable, such as changes in the way the system is operating, the way that people are working, the level of connectivity and collaboration, and a growing sense of common purpose and alignment. For example, we're hearing far more strengths-based, person-centred and inclusive language, an increased focus on supporting people to move in a way that works for them. And we're seeing an increasing diversity of people joining and participating on and offline. These signs, patterns, shifts are being captured and reported by our evaluation team using a realist approach to measurement in complex systems. These signs of change help give us all as a system the confidence to hold our nerve, to boldly leave doing things differently. And we should all take pride in these changes. These successes belong to everyone across Greater Manchester, without ego or logo. We've seen our active lives data improve and then COVID hit. As you can see, the pandemic has had a very real impact on activity levels in Greater Manchester over the last 12 months, just as it has impacted on every other aspect of our lives. So what does this all mean going forward? Well, that's for all of us to decide. This is the opportunity for us to pause, to acknowledge the realities, to lift our heads, to look to the future and to reevaluate, refocus and re-energise for sustained long-term change. So over the next few months, we want to hear what GM Moving in Action means to you and to other people, groups and organisations across Greater Manchester in all their diversity. And we want to know, what do you like to see, hear and feel over the next decade? So together we can shape what the movement in a way that will best support all of us in our joint endeavour to improve lives. So where are we now in this process? So we're not starting with a blank sheet. As a movement and a system, we've been listening and learning throughout the journey so far, and we've taken all we've heard to sketch a draft framework. Between January and April, we're convening the system in multiple ways to help gather different views and perspectives. We know from our learning journey so far that getting the co-design process itself right is key to how we grow relationships, connectivity, trust, shared purpose, and collective advocacy and leadership that will propel us forward with clarity, courage, and compassion. We now want to sense check our thinking with you so far in the framework and to use the next phase to co-design the future strategy alongside you, seeking your help to make sure it's relevant to the full diversity of people and communities and the places where they live, work and play. We will then be aligning with the new Greater Manchester strategy, ready, we hope, to launch in the summer. So here is our thinking so far, starting with what is strong and stays the same. Our core shared purpose hasn't changed, supporting active lives and closing inactivity gaps, both in terms of the immediate future in addressing the very urgent needs of today and supporting our collective recovery from COVID, and in how we build back better for future generations and a thriving city region. We think this can be broken down into three key themes. Who we are. Let's start with people. What matters to us, what motivates us, and the people around us, and how do we support people to live better, healthier, happier lives in a way that works for them? What do we do? The things that we do and have agency over, the spaces and networks and organisations we interact with, how we support each other to create stronger, better connected communities, and where we go, the places we live in, the way we get around. We need to design and create more sustainable, active, livable places and workplaces. So, what is changing? Well, we're going to refocus to really hone in on how we tackle inequalities together. This includes greater insight, names and numbers, stories and statistics, growing a more diverse, inclusive workforce and advocacy, deeper community engagement and co-production, working alongside people and communities, more inclusive language, imagery and communications, ensuring resources go to the people and places that need it most, and delivering structural changes to our policies, processes, system architecture, and physical environments. This means continuing to grow an inclusive movement. So this means continuing to grow as an inclusive movement for movement, developing collective leadership and participation, building on what we've seen last year and our ability to listen, to adapt and respond to a continually changing landscape, creating stronger interactions between the formal structures and informal networks, working alongside each other, knowing when to step back and step forward, showing collective leadership, building trust and advocacy across Greater Manchester and a far more diverse workforce. It means more deeply rooted in communities and places, reaching further into localities and neighbourhoods, building relationships, gaining deeper insight, making it relevant to people and their lives, and channeling resources to people and places where they most need it, working alongside to grow local autonomy, resilience, and sustainability. And it means creating the conditions and connectivity for a healthy ecosystem, delivering structural changes to our policies, our processes, our system architecture, and our physical environments, breaking down the blockers and the barriers and reducing the stresses on the system. Now, this isn't just fanciful metaphors or talk, it's evidence led. We have the data, we have the stories to guide the ways we work, what we measure, and how we learn to create those conditions and changes. Working together, practicing and living our shared values, applying our pointers for practice, and our approach to a whole system change. These continue, these are our strengths. These help us to work responsively as one Greater Manchester. We'll focus now on consistently putting these into practice, holding each other to account so we can all walk the talk together and help build system leadership capacity and diversity across GM, within formal and informal places and spaces, and build on the digital innovation transformation that has supported our connectivity and comms over the last year. Rooting in place, drawing on what we've learned around place-based working through the local pilot evaluation, ageing in place, Greater Manchester public sector reform to ensure rooted and relevant to people. Focus on moving from pilot to whole system and creating the conditions. There has been significant learning over the last 3 years about what makes transformational change happen when working in complex systems towards an ambitious goal. We've got evaluations from the GM walking to active ageing to GM moving, and we're learning from population health, from the Equalities Commission and Britain Thinks. All these help us move together with greater courage, clarity and compassion to create the culture and conditions. And it means continuing to pay attention to the key enablers and catalysts for change, the things that really make a difference, the workforce, our shared advocacy, digital, marketing and comms, the evidence, the evaluation, as we all work together with honesty and openness to make change happen. And key to this is how we work with partners, both at a national level, like Sport England, as we learn together. And at the same time, we're working with people and partners at a local and hyperlocal level to align strategic thinking, policy and practice, and make sure what we're doing works for everyone, recognising that what works in one place does not necessarily work somewhere else. And building an honest, open, mature learning system that listens and responds. This means making sure that everything we do is absolutely anchored by the Greater Manchester principles and commitments, of which these 6 feel particularly pertinent as we go forward. And we know that the way we cultivate our economy, our transport, our health, our care, our voluntary and community sector are key to designing moving back into life, just as these goals are dependent upon people living healthy, active lives. And we are advocates for our net carbon targets and for applying our Marmot principles as we all move more, and supporting others to be able to boldly and unapologetically set out the case for moving more within the spaces that they occupy. And we continue to take a whole system approach to do more of the things that support active lives and less of the things that get in the way, recognising these multiple layers all impact on whether or not someone's able to live an active life, and that there is no one silver bullet to address inactivity. We know that telling people that they should move more, that it's good for them, is not in itself going to make the change. We have to work together as a whole system to address the structural barriers and the wicked problems. The social determinants of activity reflect the wider social determinants of health. We can't address inactivity without addressing poverty. So we're doing more to consistently apply an inequalities lens, to really think about the demographic, spatial and socioeconomic inequalities and how they intersect. To do this well, this has to be informed by evidence and insight. So we're getting smarter about how we work with partners locally and nationally to gather, pool and layer disaggregated data to collectively paint a much more comprehensive and clear picture. This will enable all of us to direct resources and support in a way that's going to make the biggest difference to tackle those entrenched inequalities. So exploring how we best work alongside the emerging equalities networks and infrastructure and play our full part in putting Marmot principles into practice. This means layering those demographic inequalities with the socioeconomic deprivation. So what does all this look like in practice? Well, it means a longer term 10-year strategy. It means walking the talk now whilst building a better Greater Manchester for future generations. It means really giving thought to how we get the right balance between universal support to enable everyone who is currently active to continue to be so, and targeted work to address inactivity and inequality. And it means shared one-year co-delivery plans, building shared ownership and mutual accountability between key partners so we can keep listening and responding with flexibility and agility to the emerging needs and opportunities. And we're now trying to bottle this down to a number of core principles, and we're keen to get your thoughts on whether these resonate with you. Core to this is making sure we follow the mantra, nothing about us or for us without us. This has to involve you. So the next phase is to start to think of the detail. So we're listening to people to find out what are the core questions we need to be asking and the key priorities we need to focus on when thinking about supporting active people. We've heard that our mental well-being, our physical health and the deconditioning from the pandemic are all really important. They matter to us. The role that families play, intergenerational interconnection in supporting each of us to be well and active. And when thinking about communities, we're hearing about the importance of our shared collective recovery and regeneration, of paying attention to the relationships between people and communities and the services they access, thinking and rethinking the future of sports and leisure, thinking about how we create local health and wealth within our communities. And when it comes to active places, how we design those healthy, sustainable environments, livable neighbourhoods, learning from the concepts like 20-minute city and neighbourhood, creating safe streets for all, enabling all who want to be able to actively travel by walking, cycling, micromobility, and supporting people to access green and blue spaces that we know are so good for lifting our mood, and working together towards our ambitions as a Greater Manchester Green City region. And then we want to bring this all together and make it real, to show the interconnections, the interdependence across the system that enable us to move. And bring it to life, the stories, the examples of all the things that you're all doing across the city region to enable more people to move and to enable more people to live happier, healthier lives. So together we can continue to build pride in our collaboration and hope for the future. So what does this mean? Well, this is our plan on a page for our engagement over the next few months, thinking about all the conversations we want to have in all the multiple spaces that we occupy across Greater Manchester. And this includes some big conversations on some of the big themes that are coming up. There are some key questions we'd like you to consider. What are your hopes for the next 10 years? What's it going to take for us to get there together? What are the things that could get in the way and the key steps we can take? Please think about how you can continue this conversation in your workplaces, and your streets, in your homes, in your communities. So collectively, we can shape this vision for the next 10 years. Further information is available on the Greater Sport website, including some resources, some slides, this video, so you can help share and spread the word and be our eyes and ears across Greater Manchester. We hope you're as excited as we are, and we look forward to the next phase of the journey with you. GM Moving in action.